Gonna build a mountain from a little hill.
Now that the deluge of Planet Zoo information is over until June or so probably, that's when we think the Zookeeper newsletters are going to start, we can begin to speculate a little bit about some of the aspects of the game we've learned about, but that are perhaps lacking in finer detail. And yes, I know a billion different people use the music from the trailer for their intro for this game, but it is so good. It's an earworm, I cannot get it out of my head. Anyway, one such game system, and for me probably the most exciting one personally, outside of the creative building part of the game, is the genetic system for the animals. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now let's recap what we know so far. Breeding and conservation are a big part of Planet Zoo. One of the driving factors in your decision making in this game will be the proliferation of a species rather than the simple act of making money. You're here to conserve the species. Proliferation is the word of the day, by the way. To do this, you'll be breeding animals together and then releasing them into the wild. If you don't keep overturning your population like this, then the horny little so-and-sos will actually hook up with their family members. There's not much else to do in a zoo, I guess. And you'll end up with inbred children that are susceptible to disease and infertility, both of which seem like a pretty bad idea for a conservation program. Furthermore, all these little inbred babbies are going to be unique. They've said all the animals in the game will have unique personalities and some will also have a unique look. And it's those two different factors we're going to look at today, mainly focusing on the looks. So let's talk about the looks first. The example given by Frontier was focused on the zebras for pretty obvious reasons. They've got these distinctive black, or white I guess, stripes that are easy to spot, easy to tell the difference between, and apparently there is some form of randomization at play that'll mean no two zebra ever look identical. If you're getting triggered by the word zebra because it's not zebra, I'm sorry, it's how we do it in Britain, okay, leave me alone. This doesn't mean there will always be a monumental difference, of course, but it does seem important in giving your animals their own distinct personality. Something that is in itself important to make you care about each of your individual animals. If every animal looks the same, then there's very little to separate Billy, your outgoing and happy-go-lucky zebra, from Zanzibar, your emo zebra spinning "I brought you my bullets" in the corner of their exhibit. But what other animals could be differentiated in the same way? And could we expect the system to extend to actually every single animal in the game? Some examples are much less clear than the zebras. The grizzly bear, for example, that's been popping up all over the screenshots in the trailer, for example, really has no distinctive markings on its body. The two here on this screenshot are clearly different in their fur colourings, and for me the one closer to the screen has a less rounded face, I should say. But is this a genetic system, or is this gender dimorphism? The latter makes a little bit of sense because female grizzly bears tend to be a little bit more squat. They've got like little short chubby legs, and this rotund ball of fur, this absolute unit in the background, definitely looks to fit that bill. You would assume the one in the back is female and the one in the foreground is male. That said, I can't find any evidence suggesting that female grizzlies tend to be lighter in colour than their male counterparts. So whilst it could be a coincidence, and whilst it does seem the base design and build of these animals is different, perhaps the colour of the fur, the shades of brown, the saturation, etc. are dependent on the genetic system at least a little bit, so that even creatures without distinctive markings become unique and recognisable. Taking it one step further, let's look at our impossibly adorable hippo friend here. There's no fur, it's just grey and pink skin. Now, whilst grizzlies in the wild do come in a shade of different browns like the ones we just saw, hippos just kind of look like hippos, if we're honest. There's some minor ticks here and there, usually in the amount of pink present in the skin, but by and large hippos are kind of identical, definitely not differentiated as much as bears, and definitely not differentiated as much as like zebras and the like. For them to be differentiated, we may be looking at the personality system that we'll be talking about in a little bit. So going from the hippos, let's temporarily assume the system doesn't apply to every animal. We'll be talking about that as well. What other animals though will actually benefit from this system? What animals are we likely to see this genetic diversion from? From the revealed list already, we've got tigers, giraffes, lemurs, peacocks, some snakes, and some other birds we don't know yet. All animals that typically have, or at least are likely to have, distinctive markings. I think we can also assume some more big cats will be present. Leopards, cheetahs and jaguars would all be capable of showing off these differences. As an aside, that was going to last quite a while, the big cats are actually a really interesting proposition for this system in general. In the wild, melanistic versions of these animals aren't actually that rare. I'm sure you've all heard of black panthers, especially given the film somewhat recently, but a panther isn't actually an animal in and of itself. Usually it's referring to Panthera, which is a genus containing most, but not all, of the bigger cats, tigers and lions and stuff like that. But more specifically, when an animal itself is called a panther, what it tends to be referring to are two members of that genus. So when you see a black panther or a white panther, what you're actually seeing is a leopard or a jaguar with an excess or deficit of melanin. And melanin is a pigment that gives colour to skin and eyes and hair. Frontier's last game, Zoo Tycoon on the Xbox One, it didn't get a lot right, but what it did absolutely nail was the animals themselves, and one of the best aspects of these animals was the chance for any animal to be born either melanistic or leucistic. And leucistic is the lack of melanin, and it gives them sort of a lighter or white skin. It's not albinism, they're not albino, they're leucistic. They don't have the pink eyes and stuff like that. Now this would be a really cool system to bring back, as not only does it give us black panthers and the like, but it could be applied to every animal in the game with, I imagine, relative ease. Don't think it would take that long. Even our beloved chubby hippo from earlier can be leucistic in the wild, albeit fairly rarely. This would make each animal birth like an exciting little lottery, as you're never quite sure what they're going to look like, and it could even confer, and it's pushing it a little bit further now, genetic advantages onto the animals. Not only is melanism seen as a positive for jaguars and leopards, as it lets them hide amongst the forests easier, but it is also suspected to give them increased resistance to disease as well. This would be a small detail to include, but one that would lend a little bit more excitement to the breeding system in the game. Now, before we move on to the personalities, it is also worth remembering that all these animals will have different lifespans, different disease resistances, and even different sizes and proportions depending on their inherited genetics. I don't know if that means maybe two bears will look the same, but one will have like thicker back legs, or one will have bigger claws and stuff like that. Just little differences that make these animals unique. So even if the markings are the same, or relatively the same, or they're not even present, like with the hippo, like with the bears, each animal should still be an individual, just visually, based on the size and maybe the colouring and stuff like that. I could probably speculate about that melanistic system for a long time, but given Frontier has had systems exactly like that in the past, I don't think it's that unlikely to appear in Planet Zoo. For now though, let's move on to the other main aspect of the genetic system, animal personality, and this one really isn't going to take nearly as long. Each animal in the game is going to have its own personality. That potentially means some animals will be outgoing and friendly, friendly with the rest of their pack, whereas some animals, more like Zanzibar the zebra, will prefer their own space. Of course, the species of animals can impact this as well, and articles have mentioned that whilst zebras may want to herd together, other animals like lions will want enclosures with a lot fewer animals, but I'm hoping there's some grey area in there, like maybe a certain zebra, it wants to herd because it's a zebra, but it wants a few less in its herd, or it's less likely to go join the herd, just little bits of grey area to give them a little bit of uniqueness, basically. The animal's desire to breed, their greediness, their playfulness, their proneness to aggression, all of these are factors that could possibly be determined by such a personality system. Now, it is worth noting that I am 93.6% sure that I read an article saying exactly this about animal personalities, and that it even listed some examples. But having gone through about 20 different articles again in preparation for this video, I could not for the life of me find the exact quote I'm thinking of, so do take this with a grain of salt. That said, we know the animals will have unique personalities. Multiple articles have said that, so it is easy to speculate from there how those personalities would differentiate from each other. And if it's not in those factors that I've just listed, what else could it possibly be? I'm sure there's more options out there, but those seem like fairly obvious ones to go to. The animals are the focus of Planet Zoo. Everything we've seen so far really drives home this point. I'm a little anxious actually that such a huge focus on animal welfare, animal design, their animation, their genetic system, their personality, all these really interesting behaviours are going to have, like the chimpanzees are going to groom each other, lions will fight for dominance of a pack, the whole enchilada, as well as huge creative capabilities with literally hundreds, according to the website, hundreds of options, a lot of them I'm sure taken from Planet Coaster, must mean something. Something has to get sidelined, and if I had to guess, the management of the actual zoo itself, not the animals, but the zoo itself, will not be that deep as a result. But two counterpoints to that. Creativity and animals themselves are definitely the two most important aspects of this game to me. Generally speaking, I'm sure some of you will be exceptions to this rule, but generally speaking, people aren't still playing Zoo Tycoon 2 in 2019 because it's a particularly deep or interesting zoo game. I don't think the zoo mechanics in Zoo Tycoon 2 are particularly good. We're playing it because we're desperate for a creative zoo builder with interesting animals and a lot of aesthetic control, and Planet Zoo definitely seems to be nailing the former at least, and I suspect it will nail the latter. We'll just have to wait and see. It is also worth noting that because Planet Zoo is kind of built on the foundations of Planet Coaster, things like the UI are very similar, a lot of the plant life and stuff like that is probably taken across. There will be a lot of repetition in some aspects, like the guests look identical, for example. It means that although Planet Zoo's apparently been in development since June of 2017, according to a Reddit post, a lot of the groundwork was already done, so it's got like a decent dev cycle, longer than Jurassic World Evolution already, at this point in time, and the game's not even out yet, and it had a much more solid foundation to build upon. So whilst it may seem that a lot of time has been spent on this stuff, there's a chance that because the creative aspects of the game were already so developed, that there is more time to devote to stuff like zoo management than there otherwise would have been. Anyway, I suspect May is going to be a quiet month on the news front for Planet Zoo, with more information to instead land in June, but we'll be speculating a little throughout the month, hopefully this time without overhyping the game too much. I can't help myself sometimes, but I've learned my mistakes from Jurassic World Evolution, and I'm going to keep my expectations relatively tempered, and hopefully you guys will too, but I do think the game has a lot of promise, and even what we've seen so far looks really, really, really good. And if any news does appear, you can bet it'll be right here on the channel ASAP. So if you'd like to speculate with me, subscribe to the channel down below, throw me a like, and then leave a comment. How else do you think they could make this genetic system interesting? Are there any physical differences they could implement that I've missed, or personality traits you think could be included to make each animal its own individual little thing that you want to care about? Even the spiders will have their own personalities and desire for certain levels of light and heat and stuff like that, which is, yeah, it's pretty cool. Let me know what you think, and I will see you lovely folks next time. Cheers much love as always, bye-bye. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help support me a little bit more, you can do so at patreon.com/bestinslot. There's a link in the description down below. Every little really does help in times like these, but it's not at all expected, and by just watching the video you've already helped me out massively, and it makes you a pretty cool person, so well done you. Thanks for joining me either way, I'll see you next time.